This is an interview at Hampton Inn, Newburgh, New York. It is the 16th of July, 2004, approximately 8:30 a.m. Interviewers are Mike Clark, God almighty, Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Good start. Okay, could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My full name is Edwin D. Smith. I go by my middle name, Denny. My date of birth is 6/18/1949 in Poughkeepsie, New York.
What was your educational background prior to entering the service?
Graduated high school and 1 year of Dutchess Community College.
Okay, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
Okay, where were you inducted and where did you go for your basic?
I was inducted in Poughkeepsie and I went for my basic in Fort Dix.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell us about your basic and how long it was? Do you think it was adequate?
It was 8 weeks of basic. At the time it seemed like it was living hell, but as I look back on it, there was a lot of things that were a lot of fun and get a lot of laughs out of a lot of things that happened at that time. And from there I went to 2 weeks of a leadership prep school in Fort Dix, and then I went on to advanced infantry training in Fort Dix. I don't know whether training is ever adequate for, yes, it was pretty much adequate, but I don't know whether it's totally adequate for what you're up against when you get in Vietnam.
Okay. Did you go into Vietnam as a part of a unit or as a replacement?
I went as an individual.
Individual, yeah. Okay. When did you enter Vietnam?
I boarded a plane from Andrews Air Force Base, I think it is, off of Fort Dix, next to Fort Dix. I think that's the name of the Air Force Base. And we flew January 6, 1970, through Anchorage, Alaska, down through Guam and the Philippines, and then into Ben Hoa Air Force Base in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. What was your first impression when you got off the plane in Vietnam?
Well, when I first got off the plane, it was very hot because they didn't have jungle fatigues for us yet. And we were going to be issued them in Vietnam. And of course, all I had was dress greens, being January, so it was extremely hot. But I lost the jacket real quick, lost the tie real quick. And the smells were one of the first things that I noticed when I was there, from the humidity and everything. And I was scared to death, of course, didn't know what to expect. And they put us on a bus and took us over to the Ben Hoa Army Post, to where we would get our assignment. And riding through the village of Ben Hoa, all these people around, you don't know what to expect either. You don't know whether they're friendly or enemy. So yeah, I was very scared, and I think everybody on the bus was horrified.
What unit were you assigned to?
I was eventually assigned Echo Company, 1st to the 12th Cav, which I thought was going to be a mortar platoon. I figured, well, I'm going to have it fairly nice. I'm going to be in the rear working on a mortar platoon, which ultimately turned out to be a reconnaissance platoon assigned to the mortar platoon that I was assigned to. It was 18 members of this platoon, 6 members in a squad.
Okay. Well, could you just tell us about your time in Vietnam, your impressions? And
well, to start off, in this recon platoon, I was really concerned of the safety of this, because there wasn't that many of us. I always felt there was safety in numbers, and come to find out, being in a recon platoon, one of the main objectives was to make as little contact as possible, which I grew to like that concept. And we made as little contact as possible. As time went on, I got out of the field and became a company clerk for Headquarters Company, 1st to the 12th Cav, which was when I had some of the good times over there, because we did have good times. It wasn't all bad times. And as the company clerk, of course, I was responsible for the clerical work of the motor pool, mess hall, and everything like that, working under the first sergeant. Still had some responsibility on the infantry side. I had an area one sector of the Benoit Air Force Base guard. Had a guard tower and some bunkers that I was responsible for that I had to man every night. We'd get mortared about every night, you know, so you still had that fear of what was going to happen next. Being in the recon platoon, you just, it's hard to explain how you felt on a day-to-day basis. You know, you were wet all the time. You never know what's going to happen around the next tree, and so on and so forth. But after a while, you become just cold and oblivious to what's happening. I don't remember names of people, and I know I'm kind of bouncing around.
How much time did you spend out in the field at a time? Were you out there for a week or a month?
The longest I remember was a 3-week stint that we would spend out in the field, and it was just, we moved every day, set up a different location every night, observed valleys, observed villages, and, you know, movements and things like that. We would call in air support more than anything else.
When you made contact, was it with Viet Cong or NVA regulars?
There was one instance where we almost made contact with a couple of divisions. We had come upon a roadway that was heavily laden. The tire tracks were fresh, the footprints were fresh, and we were advised to. We had a recon helicopter with us, a Loach with us, and we were advised to go the other way because it was 2 divisions of NVA. Most of the time, like I say, we would observe a group. It might be some VC moving through a valley. Might be 5 or 10 of them just bringing supplies through a valley. We would call air support in on that because we, like I say, our main objective was to not give up our position, so we would call in air support. Mortars.
Now, when you were in the field for 3 weeks, were you resupplied, or did you carry that much?
We'd be resupplied every 3 days, approximately every 3 days. And my first couple of days, I carried too much water, too much food, because I didn't want to go hungry or thirsty. And I learned very quickly not to carry so much because it adds up.
Did you have any problems with malaria or leeches or snakes or scorpions?
I never got malaria. A few guys in the squad did get malaria. Were medevaced out, of course, then they came back. Leeches were everywhere. So you just bloused up your pants as best you could and your sleeves and tried to keep them off your hands and face.
Did you ever have any trouble with your M16?
No, the one I had when I first got there, all through basic training, they advised you don't take one with aluminum bolt. And of course, as soon as I got there, I got an M16 with an aluminum bolt, and I protested, and they said, "Oh, nothing wrong with this." And I said, "Well, I don't want it because I was told not to use it." So they gave me a replacement rifle. And no, I kept it very clean. I'd clean it a couple times a day, actually.
What was wrong with the aluminum bolt?
From what we were told in basic and in advanced infantry training, was the aluminum bolt on the M16 would expand at a different rate than the steel barrel itself, and it would just jam. The aluminum bolt would just swell up, and from the heat would jam. So they said, "Don't get it." So
do you remember if that gun had the bolt assist plunger?
Yeah, it was the A1. It had but still they. Like I say, in advanced training, they said don't accept it. I was, being in 1970, I was one of the later people in Vietnam, so they had learned quite a few things that weren't working well, so that was one of them.
And how much time did you spend over there? A full year?
No, it wasn't a full year. I went over January 6th. I came home November 29th of 70. They gave a Christmas early. 1970 was one of the largest number of troop employment there, but they were cutting back by the end of 70 and 71. So they gave a Christmas early out, which was November 29th, which I was very happy about, and having less than 150 days left in the military. they let me. I had spent some time in Washington D.C. 4 months prior to going to Vietnam.
Mhm.
I was assigned the honor guard down in Washington D.C. But what they did was they took and assigned too many people, and then they'd cull people out, and you had to be 5'9" to be in the marching platoon, and I'm 5'9" now. I was 5'9" when I went in, but for some reason when I was in Washington I was 5'8.5", so I didn't make the marching platoon, but that was okay.
Do you feel, when you came home, did you have any problems with protesters at all, or were you aware of them when you were over there?
Well, you're always aware of them because the word comes around and
Mm-hmm.
you hear the radio and things like that. When I came home, I carried with me a Chinese SKS, which I have papers for and everything. We found it in the cache in Vietnam, and you get papers for it, you can bring it home. It's legal.
Mhm.
And I gave it to the pilot. When I flew from California to New York, I gave it to the pilot because it was a commercial plane. Gave it to the pilot because he was also a Vietnam veteran, and things worked out well. He carried it in the cockpit, and when I got off the plane, he handed it to me, and I was carrying it off the plane, so I didn't really have too much problem with protesters in the airport. They said a few things as you're walking down the walkway, but I really didn't hear it because my wife met me there and my father-in-law met me there.
You were married before you went?
I was married before I went to Vietnam.
By any chance, did you meet your wife in Hawaii for R&R or anything?
We decided to save our R&R and our leave time, and we took 3 weeks afterwards when I got home and we went to Florida.
Mhm.
We didn't want to go through that separation again.
Mhm.
You know, it was difficult the first time, and
How long had you been married?
we got married in September of '69, so it was probably 3 or 4 months. Well, I went in January, so it was 4 months, 5 months before I went. We had planned to get married before I got drafted, and then we got married anyway.
You said on the form that you sent in about impressions, too many to list. Could you mention some that you thought really stand out now?
In reference to Vietnam,
Vietnam, yes.
the smells. Everything smells moldy for some reason. Well, it's so humid. Every thing just smells moldy. You couldn't, the kids. I really had a good feeling for the kids, but you really couldn't trust the kids. You never know whether they're armed or whether they're being sent in with a grenade. So you had to be standoffish with the kids. And I always liked the kids, and I felt bad about that, but you had to be careful with the kids. You don't remember anybody's name. That's one of the things that really stuck in my side for a long time. To this day, I have a tough time remembering people's names. I can be introduced to somebody and 5 minutes later not remember. And I think that was a defense mechanism that was built into most of us, that, if you didn't really know somebody, when they were gone, it didn't hurt as much. I knew, some of the nonsense things that happened, some of the instances where our mortar rounds would fall short and hit our own people and things like that. That stuff will stick in my mind forever. I don't know whether I've answered your question.
No, you did.
sufficiently
Yes.
or not.
Yes. Okay. In retrospect, do you feel that we should have been in Vietnam?
Based on what the feeling was in this country at the time, let me back up here. I grew up on a farm, and came to realize that, right, wrong, or indifferent, this is the greatest country in the world. And the powers to be decided that we were going to go into Vietnam and we were going to fight this conflict, war, whatever you want to call it. And it was not up to me. Now that I look back on it, it's people like me that can decide yes or no by voting, but At the time, I didn't feel it was up to me to decide whether it was right or wrong to be there. That was up to the government to decide that, because I really believed in our government. I still believe in our government, but right, wrong, or indifferent, we're there. I'm going to go. Didn't want to, but if it's my turn, I'm not going to run away from it. I'm going to go. Should we have been there? We thought that at the time we were under the impression that the communists were going to implement this domino effect, and you know, hindsight is always 20/20. Looking back on it, would that have happened? I'm not so sure that the whole world would have fallen to communism through the domino effect, but at the time, that's what we thought. So that's what we were fighting.
When and where were you discharged?
I was separated when I got into Oakland, California, and then I flew from California basically as a civilian to New York.
You intentionally flew in your civilian clothes, or?
No, I kept my uniform on because I was proud as a peacock to be a veteran. You know, like I said, I grew up on a farm. I was kind of naive to most things in the world. I had an incident on the airplane. This is probably going back to something you asked me earlier, but I had an incident on an airplane, on a commercial plane from California to New York, where I'm sitting between two businessmen. And once they knew where I was coming from, they wouldn't have anything to do with me, but I lucked out because the stewardess had lost, I shouldn't say I lucked out, but it worked out well that the stewardess had lost her brother in Vietnam, and she moved me up first class. And understood what I was going through and felt bad for me, so we got to talk about her brother and my instance and everything. But that was one, I just didn't ever expect anything like that to happen, and I'm still proud that I'm a veteran, and I'll always be proud that I was a veteran.
Do you make use of the GI Bill at all when you?
No, I haven't.
Join any veterans groups?
I'm a member of the VFW, American Legion, Vietnam Veterans of America. And when I was with Verizon, I'm retired from Verizon now. When I was with Verizon, I was vice president of the Veterans Advisory Board for the company, which is an employee resource group for veterans.
Now, do you, I know you said you had trouble with names. Did you stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
There's a few we exchanged Christmas cards. There's a fellow from Salt Lake City, a Rupert Holloman, we used to call him Junior. And unfortunately, the best friend I had, I don't know what happened. We used to meet up. His name is Dennis Zanoni. He's from Boston. We used to meet up once a year or so, different places, and for a weekend or whatever, and his wife and kids, and my wife and kids. And over the years, it just slipped away. I always called up and implemented the get together and everything, and he never called me. But we were always really good friends, and we always had a good time when we got together. And I asked his wife, I says, does it really bring up some bad memories for him, you know, to see me? If so, I'll walk away. I don't want to do that. And she said, no, he enjoys seeing you, but it just, for some reason, it just, over time, we still, you know, I still send Christmas cards out to Junior out in Salt Lake, but I don't see. I even tried to call him a little while ago, a couple weeks ago, and the number that I have is no longer in service, so I went online to see if I could find him. I'm going to hunt him down again.
Do you read about Vietnam at all?
I get the papers from the VVA and the American Legion. I read through them as best I can. I don't
Any
have
books?
a whole lot of time. I've read a couple of books.
Any of the movies?
Some of the movies. I read the book Chicken Hawk, which was about a helicopter pilot, which I thought was a pretty good book. It didn't get too elaborate on too many things, but, you know, explained flying helicopters and things. I read that one, and Platoon seemed to be one that seemed to be the closest, but of course Hollywood's always got to stick its part in there, but it seemed to be the closest to what's happening. or what happened. I mean. But I don't go to too many of the movies or read too much of the books.
I think
It's a
you've
time
already answered this in a way, but in retrospect, looking back, how do you feel about your service, your time in service?
Well, like I say, I'm proud to be an American, and I'm proud to be a veteran, and I'll always be proud of being a veteran. Whether I'm not proud of some of the things we had to do, or some of the things that we went through, but I'm still proud to be a veteran, and I'll always be proud to be a veteran, no matter what.
Do you think your time there had any change or effect on your life?
It definitely had some change and effect on my life. There's some people that I met that, like I say, I'll never forget. Some friendships that I made. Some things that happened that I'll never forget. Talking about it more seems to make it a little easier to live with. You know, a lot of veterans don't talk about it, and they seem to really be stressed over it and have problems. But since I got involved in some of these groups, and you talk about it more, you feel more comfortable with it.
You sent us 2 photographs. If you could just hold it in front of you and tell us where and when those were taken.
Oh, well, this was a great day. This was when I got out of the field to become a company clerk. Now, if you see here that I'm leaning on the rifle upside down, like I explained to you earlier, there's a flash suppressor guard on there to keep the dirt out. It's actually a safer way to lean on it so you don't end up shooting yourself in the foot or whatever. But it was a very happy day for me because I was, like I said, just gotten off the helicopter bringing me into the rear to become I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I was getting out of the field, becoming a company clerk.
Do you know approximately when and where that was taken?
That's in LZ Song Bay. And I think that was taken in February. The reason why I got out of the field was...
That's February 70, correct?
February 7th, which isn't too long after I was there. The reason why I got out of the field was my parents knew Congressman Fish, and my mother was in contact with him because she believed that I was a sole surviving son, which by Army regulation I was not. But he wrote a letter to the company commander, and I resisted a couple of times to getting out of the field, but then he finally insisted that I be taken out of the field and be brought into the rear. So at that point, I was taken out of the field and given a rear job. That was a bittersweet event because it was sweet getting out of the field, but it was kind of a bitter kind of thing because there was people that had been out in the field longer than me that I felt should have gone into the rear. This one over here is upside down. This is when I was out in the field. One of our, I don't know, it was a 2 or 3 day stand down. You're going to ask me the names of these 2 gentlemen. I don't know. I don't remember. I wish I did. So like I said before, names, they fail me. But this is the young kid of me, about 19 years old in the middle. And we were just on a 3 day stand down, just enjoying ourselves as best we could. A nice clean shower and some good mess hall food, which most guys didn't like the mess hall food, but after C rations and LRP rations, the mess hall food was pretty good. But that's also in Song Bay, on LZ Song Bay, which was a forward LZ out near the Cambodian border. And that's about what it looked like. When they cleared out an LZ, they cleared it out, and it was all dirt, brown dirt, red dirt. And when it rained, it was mud. But that's the story on those.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your interview.